Good day, everyone. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to this discussion on innovation with purpose, a human-centric approach. My name is Marina Ilari. I am Terra's CEO, and I also have with me Colleen Beres, Terra's Chief Revenue Officer, Belén Agulló, Terra's Executive Consultant of Innovation, and Matías Giannoni, Terra's CFO. And we are meeting here today to talk about innovation with purpose. Now, true innovation is not just about being faster or being smarter. It's about being more human too. It's about creating solutions that don't simply optimize processes, but also that serve people. Our translators, our project managers, our clients, and ultimately, of course, the global audiences that we help connect through languages. Technology is moving at great speed, but it is our responsibility. I really do believe that to ensure that our progress keeps people at the heart of every decision that we make. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And without further ado, let's just start discussing this concept. I'm going to start with you, Belén. What does innovation with purpose mean to you, and why is it essential in the work that we do and in today's world?
Yes, sure. So for me, personally, my personal and professional life, first of all, innovation with purpose means to really reflect and think on what I'm doing with my work, and especially to reflect on whether what I'm doing is aligned with my values compass, with the guiding values that I have in my life, and see if that is aligned and connected. That's the first thing for me personally. But then if I apply this to our work, I would think of three main things that I would like to always have in mind beyond that when we are talking about innovating with purpose in our industry. The first thing for me is to ask why. Every time we want to innovate, every time we want to use a new technology, use a new workflow, do something different, I like to start by asking why. Do we want to use AI? Okay, why do we want to use AI? What is the main purpose of implementing all this new technology? I don't like to do things just for the sake of it, but I like to have a solid reason that will help me and my teams to move forward in a more meaningful way. The second thing that is really important for me when it comes to innovation with purpose is being user-centric. I don't like to innovate in a vacuum and just implement AI without knowing what that AI will do or what that AI or new technology for. I think being user-centric is really important in multiple ways and consider all the stakeholders that we have in our industry. For example, our linguists, our translators, our subject matter experts, the tools that we use and develop, how are those tools being created, what type of new features, new innovation are included in those tools to help our linguists and people who work with us. That's one of the main stakeholders. Also, the end users. Okay, we want to use AI to do things maybe faster, cheaper, but what is the impact on the end users? Are we actually improving their experience? Are we actually making any good for them? Or are we impoverishing their user experience or the overall experience when interacting with the content that we are producing? And of course, we also want to consider all the stakeholders in a team. If we, as an innovation leader, you want to create a new workflow, you want to integrate a new technology, you want to hear from everyone involved in that workflow, project managers, vendor managers, everyone who is working with you, or QA managers as well, that will be impacted by that, and create or even co-create a solution together so that it will be more useful for them and you will avoid having blind spots. So that's the second main thing, the why, the users. And then the third thing for me that is really important to innovate with purpose is to actually measure impact, because you can okay, you can say, I will throw AI to something and now I'm innovating, no? But that's not really the case if you just start using new technology for the sake of it, if you are not measuring impact. And what can impact mean for us in our industry? It can be productivity gains. Are people actually using these tools, this AI, increasing their productivity or not? Because sometimes we just throw AI and magically we hope that it will increase productivity for everyone. And sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes it actually decreases productivity. Or another thing could be, is it increasing quality? Because that's another reason why one would want to innovate or to add new tools into a workflow. Is it actually increasing quality? Do we have less bugs? Do we have less issues with evaluations and so on and so forth? That would be another thing. And then going back to the end user, is this content being more engaging? Are we increasing the number of players or of users who are interacting with this content? Is it actually having an impact on the outcome that has to do with business goals? So really sit down and think about which success KPIs we would like to have for a specific innovation project, and align with all the stakeholders and align that with the why. So that would be probably the 3 layers that I would go about when it comes to innovating with purpose. And finally, why is it essential for us to innovate with purpose? I think the main reason is sustainability. If we don't innovate with purpose and we just go blindly without considering all these things, it might happen that our industry won't be sustainable in the future, but it goes beyond our industry, actually. I'm not going to talk about all the technology news that you can read on the newspapers with very dystopian titles, but I believe we must protect what makes us human, and we should think about long-term consequences of innovating, implementing AI, and how this will impact what we do in the future. For us, for example, in our industry, some consequences that I fear are, for example, that we face a shortage of talent because no one wants to start working in localization because it's not a sustainable industry, and then we will need that talent anyway. That could be something negative. Or also the impact on languages. Are we impoverishing languages because of the use of AI, because we are, not creating new content from scratch and everything is regurgitated by AI? Will that have a long-term impact in how we communicate, in how our languages are evolving? These are things, more existential topics that I think we should consider as well when innovating with purpose.
Yeah, I love everything you said, Belén, and I love that you started with the why. Why are you trying to bring in this technology? What solution are you trying to solve, really? Or is it because everyone seems to be using it that you want to use it without like a specific reason or a specific problem that you're trying to solve, right? So not losing sight of that is so important. But the other concept that I wanted to have time to talk about is the humans at the core concept, which is a concept that we talk a lot about in our industry. What does it really mean for our industry? Colleen, would you like to tackle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this complements what Belén was saying very well, because language is a really interesting beast, right? It's powerful because it informs and is very functional. Practicality is paramount, which is why the evolution has been towards this commoditization, to create an opportunity for it to be available to the masses. But really, as we understand, language at its core is about humans connecting. And so our industry really needs to reinforce that AI specifically is a tool. It's something that can function to demonstrate that creativity. But if we don't keep humans at the core of it, like Belén said, there are so many different ramifications that can really degrade how we are able to continue to evolve as people. So when you are able to keep humans at the core, it's going to resonate deeper, it's going to be more customized, it's going to be curated for that human end user. But there's still the ability to create a broader reach and allow more information to be accessible to people in multiple languages. So having that balance of accessibility of information, but also making sure that we as people are still effectively communicating on a human level is really critical for us to maintain that humanity, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I love that. I always think about this as a consumer myself. Like, do I want to consume something that is, devoid of emotion or devoid of cultural relevance and human connection, really? And the answer for me is like, no. So very, very important not to lose sight of that as well. So Mati, now I want to ask about the real impact of AI on business. Can you talk a little bit of that? Any data that you found interesting?
Yeah, I mean, let me start with the notion that we know that we are in this period in which it seems, and there are many analysts in the financial sector that are starting to say this resembles a bubble. This is looking somehow like the dot-com bubble in the 2000s, and we are still not seeing the real business impact of this. On where this will bring productivity, where will this help us cut costs. There are like two different versions of this story that could be told. First, I'd say that if we look at the data, we are still far from the type of a scenario that brought about the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s, mainly because AI, among other things, is being driven primarily by companies that are very robust in their cash flows. We are talking about the likes of NVIDIA, Google, Meta, AWS. These type of companies have solid cash flows that allow them to finance all these capital expenses. And this, I mean, if we have to go back to a comparison to a type of technological change that brought about this level of capital expenses, it's not the dot-com bubble where we should be looking at, but the second industrial revolution at the beginning of the 20th century. And with this, I mean like the type of investments that you need to do to thrive in AI are very different from the type of investment that you needed to do back in the 2000s. This means that you have lots of capital expenses. So the upfront value to develop AI is very, very, very expensive, and only a few firms are able to do that. One big underworld of startups that are funded by venture capitalists, but they are not the ones that are thriving, and they are not the ones that are leading, for example, the stock market. I mean, if we look at the stock market today, that's NVIDIA, that's semiconductors, etc. So that I would say that that's a positive news, but at least it shows that it's something different. It's not exactly the same as what the dot-com bubble was. Now, the problem related to that is that we don't know yet what's the obsolescence point of all those capital expenses. So we know that these big companies are using their own money to finance this expansion, but we still don't know what's the depreciation of all these new clusters they are creating. Like the GPUs they are buying today will be used for next year. Like NVIDIA is releasing new architectures every day. And then begins the question, okay, we have this technology, but what is this technology useful for? So there is where when you start seeing like these diversions between the optimists that are mostly people from the sector that have like some vested interest in the success of this, and labor economists and economists that are focused on technology. So I want to talk about two economists that are like the research on the labor market impact and industrial impact of technology is not new. And the two main economists that work on this are David Autor and Darren Acemoglu. Acemoglu is a recent Nobel Prize winner. There are two stories that they tell. I think they are complementary stories. The first, Acemoglu, what he does, and the way that labor economists usually do this is like they start by saying, okay, I have this technology, but what is it that I can do in terms of the tasks that are humans doing today that I can bring the technology and have it done by a human? And then when you do that, you have to go to the microdata and you have to start disaggregating. Okay, humans do this, do that. I mean, like we do thousands of different tasks at work, be it in industrial production, be it in translation, be it in services. Like we do many different things. And what Acemoglu did in his latest one of his last papers on this topic was like, okay, I'm going to classify all the tasks that humans do in an advanced economy like the US. And then I'm going to say, okay, the AI in its current status, what it allows me to replace? Okay, it can replace this type of worker, it can replace this type of worker, this other worker cannot be replaced, etc. What did he found? Less than 1%. I mean, the impact on the GDP, on the total size of the economy among advanced economies is less than 1%. And here is like the first part of what I was saying is like when we start seeing these diversions. The estimate is that the investment in the expansion of data warehouses and clusters for AI next year will be between 2 and 3% of the US GDP. That's massive. That's a massive investment. And on the other hand, we have these economists who is saying, when I do this microdata analysis, only 1% of the GDP in the best scenario will be transformed, like will be replaced by AI. So, I mean, in one sense, you can say, well, the industry is overshooting. You are putting lots of cash in expanding these data centers. But on the other hand, like the tasks that can be automated and replaced with this are less than 1% of the GDP. So something doesn't add. Either there is something that we are not seeing, which is what the techno optimists are thinking. Like, okay, like there is something, be it AGI or whatever you think that will appear as a new product or as a new way of replacing humans that will be much more radical than what we are seeing now. But what we are seeing now is not enough to replace, at least as a Mogul's classification, is not enough to replace humans. Now, the other take is David Otter's take, which is also like a major, one of the most important labor economists. And what he says is that he has this classification. I mean, it was one of the things that made him famous, which is this differentiation between routine tasks and non-routine tasks. And what he says is that in the 70s, when computers came, like when computing started expanding and became like central to most business processes, what you go to replace with computing was routine tasks. So all the clerical work, think someone like doing conciliations on a table, like typical clerical work, was easily replaced. Like the typical bank work was replaced by a computer. Like suddenly you have Excel. Once you have Excel, you are replacing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bookkeepers. Now, that's something that computers allow to do, and what he calls that is the empty of the middle. Basically, anyone that have middle skills. So on the one hand, like he divides the world between routine and non-routine tasks. You have highly skilled workers, be it, for example, lawyers, for example, highly skilled doctors, like highly skilled professionals, surgeons. And on the other end, you have like what he calls low skill, which is like more caring responsibilities, everything that has to do with more like the human component, from cleaners, anything that cannot be replaced by a computer. The middle, which is a clerical work, is what disappeared, and all these people was replaced, quote unquote, not entirely, but by computers. Now, the technology. The way he sees AI is different in the sense that he sees it as a potentially big equalizing force in the labor market, because suddenly it could allow people with very few, very small training in a certain topic or a certain skill, which complemented by AI could be much better. Think, for example, and like he gives several examples, but think, for example, someone that has some BA in law or some like BA in something related to law, and then by using GPT, this person could operate as good as a lawyer, as a fully trained lawyer that went to grad school. So suddenly you are replacing someone that require like X years of training with someone that doesn't require that many years of training. Or think a nurse. A nurse can now use AI to replace not like a surgeon, like the most advanced surgeon, but it can replace a GP in everyday checkups, and that he sees as a big equalizing force. But we are still not seeing that, and if you believe as a model, I mean, that's so far seems far-fetched, partly because of all the deficiencies we see in AI. Now, the third take, which is like the take that's more business oriented and like that some consultancies are seeing, is the fact that the business impact has been what McKinsey calls like this horizontal integration of AI. And if, I mean, like each of us uses probably GPT or Claude or any of these technologies in our everyday work, like to draft emails, to like polish whatever we wrote, etc. But if you look at the impact in terms of like the productivity gains and the savings for a company, that's almost zero. Like at the individual level, we are seeing like, okay, I mean, like I'm saving 20% of the time that I would have spent drafting an email. But on the other hand, that's not monetized. That there isn't anything that's happening in the process or in the value chain that is making us save money. I mean, like, this is across any industry. Like McKinsey doesn't focus on any particular industry; it's happening in all industries. And what they say, well, the way forward is like what they call agentic AI and vertical integration. But for vertical integration, like you go back to Acemoglu's problem, which is like we're still not seeing the type of technology that would, at each step, not make enough mistakes such that the human would be cheaper and better at doing that. And remember that we are spending 3% of the GDP just on creating the data centers for this to run. And like, well, once you think that the hourly cost of a GPU is $4, then well, we're not that far of like say like humans are. I mean, like I'm on top of all the infrastructure and on top of the development cost, and you're saying like, well, maybe humans are actually cheaper, and you are ready to keep enough humans.
That is so interesting, Mati. And one thing I kept thinking about when you were explaining the categorization of like the workforce is, where do expert linguists, translators that are very specialized, that are certified, where are they standing in this categorization, right? Like, I think the general public tends to see them as, oh, anyone that speaks another language can do this work, right? Where we as language professionals know that this is like a really highly skilled profession, and that you need a lot of preparation, a lot of studies, and a lot of, again, specialization to be able to work at the level that the industry requires, right? So I like to see them as, you know, the experts, the specialists on that side of the spectrum, right? But yeah, let's talk about a little bit about innovation also, because one thing that is interesting is that we don't actually create anything in the language industry, right? Like we are not actually like selling a product or how do you innovate in an industry where we don't actually create anything? Belén, what do you have to say about that?
Yes, that's a really good question, Marina. And yes, this is something that I ask myself many times. Definitely, we are an industry that transforms, because we don't create, we don't generate the content most of the times, at least how the industry looks like at the moment. We don't generate the content or the products. We are not content creators, so to say. We transform what content creators do. So innovating in an industry like that is really difficult. Actually, usually the disruptions that came to our industry, they came from outsiders, in a way, from technology experts, not from linguists, not from translators, not from people with a translation background. The main disruptions that we've lived in the past couple of decades have been CAT tools and translation memories, then machine translation in all its evolution, especially the latest models neural machine translation, which was created by Google in 2017, and now a couple of years ago we have LLMs, which were not created to translate, but by surprise, those little things also know how to translate that, right? So this is what is actually like, these disruptions come from technology and not from us. So how I see that our industry continuously innovate is finding ways to prove the value of localization despite of all these disruptions, right? Finding new ways to convince people that what we do actually matter. And we are succeeding so far because, our industry has been growing year after year. And to me, that's the best way of innovating. And how you see that is that we've been rebranding as industry. We are obsessed with rebranding what we do. We started with translation in the 70s or even before the studies on the Bible translation and how, that's probably the most studied translation in the history of translation study. And we started with translation. Then when we had the more digital environments, we started to have computers and software. We started to look at it from a localization perspective. Now we don't translate, we do something more, we localize. And localization is not just translating words, it's also adapting the product to a specific region. And that also means adapting currency, adapting the date, adapting the time format, and so on and so forth, no? So that lived for some years. Then all of a sudden that was not enough, and new services like transcreation emerged. So we don't just translate words or adapt currencies and time and dates. We also switch the message to connect with the audiences, and this is very important for marketing localization. And so on and so forth. So and the newest one, which I love as well, is we don't do localization. Now we do global experiences. So we somehow recreate what we do for the target markets, and it's not about language accuracy, it's not about fluency. Now it's about the outcomes. So now we are looking at how what we do in localization, translation, transcreation actually impacts the outcome, the end users, the business KPIs, the click-through rate, the monthly active users, the people who actually purchase that product, and so on and so forth, right? Website traffic, there are many different KPIs. So to me, I see that that's the way I find that very creative, honestly, how every 5 years or even every 2 years we keep rebranding ourselves. And I think what makes us special and what makes us a very innovative industry is that we are very flexible and very resilient, because it doesn't matter. Now we have ChatGPT, we have LLMs, and everyone is saying you can automate everything with LLMs. We are looking at new ways of how our services still make sense for our customers, and that's, I think, one of the most interesting things. And yes, keep refreshing our value proposition, finding ways to make this cultural intelligence relevant for the new needs. Because yes, if maybe LLMs are able to translate in certain languages in a decent level, sometimes depends on the content type and many things, what else can we add? What is the value? Once that is automated, what's the next thing that we can do? And this also comes in ways of being more strategic about localization. It's not just I'm a company X, I have this product, and I will localize all my content in all these languages. It's not about that. It's about, okay, I'm company X, I want to go to market into these multiple territories, and I want to decide, first of all, which territories make sense for us. And that's also a place where LSPs add value. We, for example, at Terra, we have our ROI calculator that we share with our clients to, try to figure out which new languages make sense from a business perspective to expand. So that's a way that we provide insights that are relevant. Also things like culturalization. Okay, I want to launch this product in certain territories in Asia, for example, but I'm having issues. The copy is not resonating. The content that we're creating is not resonating. Are we in the right channels? Are we conveying the right message to audiences there? So this is where we also add value. Or user experience, global user experience. Okay, we test a product in a given language, but it's not, these days it's not only about seeing if the translations are correct, right? Or if the text overruns a box, which of course is still important because you want the product to be usable. But it's also about, does this whole experience make sense to the users or to the audiences in a certain territory? So I think that's how we keep innovating, is that in our industry, is that we find ways to keep seeing what is the new emerging need that, all this innovation, all this technical and technology disruption brings new complexity and new things to do. And we always find those new things, and we are always able to refresh what we do, refresh our service offering. And I think we are really, really creative in our industry.
That is very true. And also something that came to mind is the fact that these technology companies such as OpenAI and Perplexity are now looking for localization managers. So the companies that, are providing this LLM service are looking for someone to manage their localization needs, which I think is like really telling of where the industry is continuing to be heading. Now, back to you, Colleen. In your view, why are we still relevant? I mean, how are we bringing value as localization professionals?
One thing that what you were mentioning before about specialized talent and the importance of maintaining and appreciating that level of specialization is, I think it really compels us to stand tall in our place of being guardians of language. That it's our responsibility to really insert ourselves into this moment and disrupt the momentum of almost this runaway train that I think AI has started moving in. There's this place where it feels really unchecked, that people feel as if now they have the green light to just proceed without people. And I think it's really important for us to demonstrate our relevance by showing, hey, this is where we still have a level of expertise, and we aren't going to just sit by and let this momentum continue. Yes, technology is so important, but what's frustrating to me is sometimes this concept that innovation and technology are synonymous, and they aren't. So much innovation has happened before, as Mati was mentioning, that the evolution of how the modern world has progressed has happened without technology. And so I think part of that resonates with the human component that we keep talking about when we talk about innovation with purpose and being human-centric. The value that we bring is that we are cultivating solutions. So we're creating the frameworks that help our clients achieve their goals by using technology and thinking in a way, like Belén said, that is super creative to make sure that they're getting the most out of these technologies that they're wanting to leverage. We educate them, we present options, we outline the pros and the cons of the technology or the process changes, and we really advise them on the best way to invest and develop. So there's so much space for us to continue to be guardians of the work that we find so important, but also from a very, very practical stance of making sure that companies aren't falling for the hype and that they understand what they're doing and what the consequences are going to be, so that also the people who we're talking to can in turn help educate their stakeholders and make sure that those stakeholders aren't falling for the hype and making big mistakes like what you're talking about, Marina, where whole workforces are being laid off to then only go through the process of saying, oh gosh, we need these people. So now we got rid of them and we paid them severance packages, but we need them. So let's go through the process of hiring them again. And it really creates an inefficiency that deteriorates any type of efficiencies they were trying to gain through using this technology. So again, it comes down to us being partners for the people who are looking to implement this and making sure that their desires to implement align with the goals that they want to achieve as an enterprise or as an organization, so that it can have a net positive change at the end.
Yeah, very well said. Mati, can we implement AI equally across the board in localization? Well, can you talk about the imbalance there of data?
Yeah, I mean, if we go back, I mean, like, I think it's interesting to go back to how this creature was born. I mean, how what we call AI nowadays was born. And the paper that invented this technology was a paper by Google 2017. That was called "Attention is All You Need." And if you go to that paper, what they were trying to do was translation. I mean, like, basically the technology was invented. I mean, like, this attention is all you need. Basically, what they discover is the idea that if you have like this long attention span in the statistical model that predicts an output of words, then you get better translations than with the old neural machine translation. The old neural machine translation is just like a sparser version, and with like some like these technical nuances. I don't want to go into the depths of that, but basically this was created for translation, and interestingly, it ended up. I mean, what is it that was invented for translation? I mean, basically you have an input, and this is what's called like broadly an encoder-decoder architecture. So you have an input, and to that input you go and have a statistical model predict what are the most likely words that would follow from that. And they did that for translation originally, but then what made this technology successful was a chatbot, which was unrelated to translation. I mean, because it was, I mean, like, if I'm using the chatbot in English, I'm English to English. So it's like after I say, I write a certain series of words, then it gets predicted the next series of words in English. And the problem with language is that, I mean, and why does this work? I mean, the statistical principle behind this, I mean, it's complex, but it's not extremely complex because it's just, like a variation of a neural network. So some variation of a neural network that has some nuances. The first part is the encoder part. And the encoder part is like creating a vector of values, a long vector of values that is related to any word or any what's called token, to any word or composition, bigram or trigram, a composition of words. And it works because you have massive data. You have lots and lots of data where you grab all this data and you say, okay, what are the relationships between words? And you ask a statistical model to find the relationship between words. And how does that happen? By co-occurrence. So, for example, if I say the kid plays is something that appears over and over and over and over in the data, and eventually the model learns that when I say the kid, one of the likely words that will follow is plays. Now, the vast majority of the data that we have to train these models and to create these vectors, and then that it's called the embeddings, and to create these embeddings and to then have like this output is in English and in the languages that are most diffuse. So it's and English has a very particular structure. It's a language that has subject, object, verb. The kid plays. So that means that as soon as you start entering into languages that have different syntactical and morphological structures, when you have, like, for example, declinations, and you have like more complexities than in English or Spanish, which are or like the most commonly diffused languages. And if you start using this for translation between English and Spanish, for example, the model quickly starts recognizing, okay, if I'm going from a subject, object, verb structure, then and I'm going to a subject, verb, object structure. And those are like what happens among common languages. But when you start bringing in other languages that are less commonly diffused, the model starts getting confused, and it starts mixing the word order, and it starts mixing the declinations, the morphological structure, all these things that are nuances. And that's the grammatical syntactical part. The other part is the meaning. Meaning is meaning, of course, numerically does not exist. Meaning is in the human brain. Now, the way that we have found is to create these long vectors that when I say play, there is a long vector that has, for example, 128 numbers or 256 numbers, that somehow tells a model that knows to recognize what that vector means, that play has this relation of meanings, it's related to a bunch of things that are connected. Now, that's culturally that's culturally delimited. That's very idiosyncratic, because that same word in a very different context or in another language, in a different, like, it's not sensitive to the culture of that language that has lower diffusion than the main languages with which the model was trained. So you have problems with meaning, you have problems with idioms, you have problems with morphological structures, you have problems with grammar, you have problems with syntax, and all those things make it that if you have a language that has low diffusion, it's much more harder to think that you can use AI for those languages. There are fixes, there are potential fixes, but all those are A, early stage, and second, in many cases, they are not economically, so far, they're not economically profitable. Because if you have to train a vast model, for example, for Thai, using only Thai data, you have to create, for example, artificial data because you don't have enough digitized data in order to train a model that's specifically for that language, and no one is doing that. And in order for someone to do that, you will have to invest as much as you are investing to develop GPT-4 or GPT-5, specifically for Thai. And I don't see that happening. Maybe, with some advances in technology, that will happen at some point, but that's not where we are at now. So right now, it's for the languages of large diffusion, yes, we can use it. For languages of more limited diffusion, it's still hard to think how that will work.
Yeah, I don't think enough people talk about this, and I think this is so important. We're talking about so many languages that don't have enough data. So we're gonna sum up this discussion, and we're gonna end it. If you could each tell me, sum up the essence of innovation with purpose in what sentence, what would it be? Belén, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can start. So for me, it would be to implement change for the benefit of the majority of people, for the majority of us, without causing any harm to anyone in the process.
Very nice. Colleen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Mine would be embracing the narrative that innovation is meant to improve life and not just implement the newest technology.
Love that. Mati, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, first I will distinguish between types of innovation, because for me, one thing is radical innovation. For example, if you are saying, I'm inventing a new product, that's what some economists like Schumpeter say, radical innovation is something that's extremely disruptive. And the invention of the iPhone. The iPhone is something that wasn't there and created its own market. Now, when we are talking about specific industries, like our case, I like to think about incremental innovation. And for me, incremental innovation is something that improves processes or productivity. If it's not doing any of those, like what Belén was saying at the beginning, the why? If it's not improving processes and increasing the productivity and your bottom line, then innovation for the sake of it makes no sense when you're in this type of industries.
Yeah. I think my idea of the essence of this is that it ties up to everything you're saying. I think it's making things easier for the humans while also elevating their expertise and celebrating what makes us intrinsically human. So with that, thank you so much, Belén, Colleen, Matías, for discussing this with me. And I hope people watching find this content useful. And get in touch with us if you want to talk about any of these very relevant topics. Thank you.